Hello everyone, I'm Joel Benjamin, and you are tuning in to ICC's Game of the Week. There may be no tournament in the world like the Bunratty Chess Festival. If the grueling weekend schedule of fast time-controlled games doesn't drain you completely, the lengthy pub sessions will likely finish you off. Though the mood is light, the quality of competition is quite serious. The growing grandmaster ranks have been augmented in the last 2 years by the presence of a legitimate elite player, Peter Svidler. Svidler took the Bunratty Masters for the second year running, ceding only one draw to Bogdan Lalich. Svidler's most interesting win came over the British grandmaster Peter Wells. With kings on opposite wings, Wells chose not to sit around and wait for Svidler's attack, but logically sought play in the center. His bold sacrifice may have thrown a scare into Svidler, but in the end, the defense rested. Let's see how it happened. All right, so we have Peter Svidler white, Peter Wells black. I think that's probably our first all-Peter matchup in Game of the Week. And it went like this, a Sicilian. And like last week's game, we have, again, a Richter-Rouser. So we're getting little Richter-Rouser tutorial. Bishop g5, that's the move that gives the opening its name. But in this game, Black's treatment was a bit different from last week. Last week, Black played with the king in the center with a6 and bishop d7. But here, Wells goes for quick kingside castling, setting up an immediate position of kings on opposite wings. Now, traditionally, Black would castle right away in this position, and then only after f4, knight takes d4. This is traditional line, a very old line, queen takes d4, and generally met by queen a5, and the theory just kind of takes off from there. Instead of f4, white has a good option in knight to b3. This is kind of a threat to take the knight on f6. If Black takes back with a bishop, he loses his d-pawn. For instance, if a6, bishop f6, if Black takes back with a bishop, white takes on d6, Black doesn't get enough compensation. So normally knight b3 is met by queen b6. And again, there's a whole lot of theory that goes on from there. I actually played this variation once against Vishy Anand in the Groningen PCA qualifier, and I actually achieved a winning position with white, although eventually it went south for me. Wells is going for a different move order, which avoids that by taking on d4 right away. And this perhaps gives white some options. I think at one time e5 was thought to be good here, but most players don't go for it because it's potentially simplifying. And instead f3. So last week we saw the game where Black kept the king in the center and white played f4. And here's a different one. Black castles kingside and white plays for an English attack type of approach, looking to put these pawns forward against the Black king. So after f3, standard business, a6, h4, and white is often doing h4 in this opening before anything else. One thing that it does is it protects the bishop in case of any tactics. Sometimes can be a very useful move. b5. The ubiquitous king b1 is done in almost every game in the Sicilian where white castle queenside, it seems, gets off the c-file, off the diagonal, and also protects the a2 pawn better. Bishop to b7. White gets those pawns rolling with g4. Rook c8, bishop d3, completing the development and connecting the rooks. Queen c7. And now queen e3. This is also a very typical move for white in this opening. It does a couple of things. It sort of gets the white queen away from action in the center. Black could advance with e5 with tempo, or d5, and the queen could get exposed on d4. Another thing the queen retreat does is it frees up a square for the knight to go to e2 and d4. The knight is very well placed on d4. It really kind of blocks up the center, and if black ever pushes e5, it can go to f5. Rook fd8, knight e2, and in one move, as I said, the knight's going to be on d4. And then white only has to really figure out how he wants to press with these kingside pawns. The queen on e3 is can be in some situations slightly awkward. I think that white would prefer to have the queen on d2. Even in this position, queen d2, d5, e5. Actually, there are some strange tactics where after d5, e5 with the queen on d2, black can't take the pawn on e5 because of bishop f4, but he can play the move knight e4, trying to use the pin. That was with the queen on d2. Here with the queen on e3, the tactics play very differently. But it also has to be said that the bishop on g5 often likes to retreat to e3, and it doesn't have that square ready. So white is going to have to figure out exactly how he wants to advance on the king side. On the other hand, black is kind of all dressed up and ready to go somewhere. He's mobilized all his pieces, and he's looking to do something. Well, he certainly could play, for instance, b4 with the idea of a5 and a general advance of pawns on the queen side. If he wants central action, there's also the option of going e5, figuring on d5 without white being able to play e5 himself. The downside is that it weakens the f5 square. White can play knight to g3. After d5, knight f5 is possible, not necessarily the strongest move. Bishop c5, queen e2, queen b6. These are just some of the possibilities with very well dynamic play for both sides. Position that's a bit hard to judge. Well, Wells also went for a play in the center. He did it a bit differently, but it was generally logical what he went about doing, and it just didn't quite work, it seems. He played d5, and Svidler predictably played e5. It's really the only continuation, otherwise black simply has a better position. Now, Wells played d5 with his next move in mind, because he simply can't play knight d7 because his bishop would hang. And if he has to play knight e8, the knight is very passively placed. White will dunk the knight on d4, and now black has just made his pieces a lot weaker and is even more vulnerable to a kingside attack. Now the idea was his follow-up, pawn to d4, sacrificing pawn. Knight takes d4, knight to d5, queen e2. Note that queen e4, threatening a mate down at h7, would just be a blunder because knight c3, check, winning the queen. On the other hand, queen to e1 was also a move that could have been considered. Queen to e2, and now we have knight to b4. Now, white doesn't have to try to save the bishop on d3, but it's a good piece. He would rather not play in the position with knight against the bishop, and black could have some long-term compensation. So Svidler plays the move bishop e4 to trade bishops. Now Wells makes an even bolder move than when he played d5 and d4, sacrificing his d-pawn. He traded bishops and then played queen c4, a move with a very strong threat to the a2 pawn. and awkward for white to defend. He certainly can do so with b3, and black will retreat the queen. Now it's not so easy to find a path to advantage for white. c3 square, of course, is very tender. White has to make sure to defend it. With the help of the computer, I found a very interesting line here. Knight to e2. And now, if black tries to grab a pawn, now here, knight takes c2, runs into rook c1, and that pin is winning for black. Instead, black can take with the queen. Queen takes, and now rook takes c2 is not possible because of a back-ranked mate. Knight takes c2 is strongly answered by rook c1, knight a3, king b2, rook takes c1, king takes c1. This is one of those lines where the computer has a big score and you're playing through it and trying to figure it out. And then when you get to the end, it starts to make sense. Black knight is out of play, and white is planning to make a run with his knight after the black pawns. And not only the black pawns are very vulnerable, but in some situations, the knight could get in trouble too. If the knight gets to c6 and the king comes to b2, that will force black to cough up his b-pawn just to save his knight. Well, Svidler was not interested in half measures like that. He took up the challenge with bishop takes e7, and leading to a completely different type of game than b3, but perhaps both moves are objectively of about equal value. Now, Wells took on a2, and after king c1, knight takes c2, and that move certainly looks a bit scary from the white point of view. White cannot play knight takes c2 because queen a1 is mate. In fact, after knight takes c2, white's move really is kind of forced. He could try queen takes c2, but it's going to come out very good for black. Rook takes c2, knight takes c2, and now rook to c8, menacing, among other things, queen a1 check, winning the b2 pawn, totally denuding the white king. So white could try rook d8 check to trade, but now queen d5 hitting the bishop, and the next move black is going to take the pawn in f3. Even though white has a rook and two minor pieces for the queen, which is quite a lot in terms of pieces, black is really cleaning out white's set of pawns, and because of that, I would have to say that black has a definite advantage. Well, there's only one move for Svidler. Most likely he had planned it, and that's knight c6, finding another way to block the c-file, but again maintaining actually square for the king. Funnily enough, queen a1 can be met by king takes c2. Well, after knight c6, this is where Wells missed his chance. He had a strong move which perhaps would have equalized the game. And his big chance was to play knight to d4 in this position. Now again, white doesn't really have a lot of choice after that move. Black is threatening to take the knight on c6, also queen a1 check, and the white king is going to be driven out into a very dangerous situation. So white pretty much has to play rook takes d4. Now after rook takes d4, queen takes d4. Now not rook takes c6 check, because the white king runs, and we actually end up with a situation somewhat similar to the game. Instead of taking the knight, black just goes queen a1 check and grabs the rook. We reach a position where white has two pieces for a rook, which is very nice, except the problem is that his king is so exposed, it's very difficult to avoid perpetual checks. Black is ready to start checking on the next move. And also, while the knight on c6 isn't attacked, the white queen on d4 is in a position of defending it with the mate on d8. So white cannot afford to, let's say, play a move like queen back to f2 because he'll have his knight taken off and then be down the exchange. So this position seems to be dynamically equal. Actually, perpetual check is a fairly likely result from here. Well, Wells did not get that right. This was a tournament played very fast time control. I believe it's something around the neighborhood of game in an hour and a half. And you know, there's a good chance that he was starting to run a little bit low on time by now. Move rook d5 is really the second best option, but it's a considerable step down, as after rook d5 and queen takes c2. Now white is on top. After queen a1 check, if white errs with king d2, queen takes h1 actually gives black a better version of that rook against two pieces position I talked about a moment ago. Actually, this one may well be favorable for black. The pin on the knight on c6 is annoying, and black is again menacing the white pawns. The problem for Wells is that Svidler plays queen b1, and after rook c6, his king runs out into the middle. And although this king is a bit exposed and there are some white weaknesses, black just quite doesn't have enough to make up for that lost piece. Queen a5 check is actually a mistake. Black could put up more resistance with queen a4, although I think that white would eventually see his way to a win. Before cutting off the queen from the side is probably a good move. Queen a3, rook to c1, and certainly black doesn't want to trade off into piece down ending, but rook c4, blocking the file, rook takes c4, b takes c4. This maintains some chances for black. Queen f5, queen b2 check, king d1, couple more checks, h5, kind of looking to come back and check some more and drive the king into an exposed position. Well, white is much better here. Actually, e6 is considered by the computer to be the strongest move, and that continuation could be queen check, another check, hg, queen takes g4, queen to d1, and that move actually guards the check on g1 very conveniently, and this position is likely winning for white. White should be able to get the passed pawns under control and win with the extra piece. Well, I find that it's always a bit demoralizing when you make your big play and you see that it's not working out for you, especially if you notice that maybe you had a better alternative than the move that you played. And sometimes you don't, put up the best resistance, or you try something and it doesn't work. And that's kind of what Wells did here. He played queen check, and after king e2, queen c7 was not a bad idea. Actually, black is threatening three things: the bishop on e7, the pawn on e5, and a check on c2. The problem is that white defends all three threats with one move, bishop d6. The third threat is defended because after rook c2 check, certainly not king d3, queen c4, and then white is about to get mated. But king d1, still attacking the queen, no more checks, and the next move, white is going to take the rook off. So sadly, black has no time for rook c2 check. And after queen c8, white has a simple move to defend everything. Just king d2, covering the c2 square. And white is poised to play rook to c1 totally neutralizing black's play on the c-file, and white's extra piece is surely going to decide the game. So a very spirited effort by Peter Wells. I applaud when an ordinary grandmaster is playing a super grandmaster and takes it to him, doesn't wait around for the axe to fall. That's the right way to go about it. And he had some chances, but he missed that key knight d4 move, which might have gotten him a draw or possibly even a win. But Peter Svidler is a tough player, and he very often finds a way to navigate through the complications better than his opponents. So that's it. That's our game this week from the Bunratty Masters. Peter Svidler victorious again, and it's a tournament that I played in a few times. Haven't been able to make it out there the last few years, but if you're looking for a fun tournament to go to, Bunratty is definitely one of those. Okay, well that wraps it up for another week. I'm Joel Benjamin, and I hope that you'll join me next time on ICC's Game of the Week.
Hi, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, The 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.